I'm Mina Al-Rabi. I'm the editor-in-chief of The National, coming to you from our newsroom in Abu Dhabi. Thank you for joining us for this conversation as we unpack the developments that finally there is at least the start of a deal between Hamas and Israel to end this heartbreaking war in Gaza and the terrible time that the people of Gaza, but also the families of hostages in Israel and others in the region have lived through. It's all still very fragile and tentative, but it seems we could be close to having a ceasefire in place as early as the next few hours. I am delighted that I have with me in this conversation Naram Mohanna, our Gaza correspondent, who continues to have family and friends back in Gaza, but has also done a valiant job of covering everything that has been happening in the last 2 years. Also, we have Thomas Helm, our Jerusalem correspondent, and has been covering not only from Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, but also the West Bank developments that, of course, are tied into the October 7th, 2023 events, but also the wider issue of the occupation of Palestine. And we have with us Mohammed Ali Harisi, who is our foreign editor here based in Abu Dhabi. We will be taking your questions, so please add a question in the Q&A box. If and when you have a question, I will try to come to you as we talk about developments. So, Naram, I want to start with you. First, about the significance of the announcement that there was this agreement and what it means on the ground for people in Gaza.
Thanks, Mina, for this meeting and for this panel. Actually, people in Gaza are still careful in their feelings. They are confusing to feel happy or to just wait until the ceasefire really taking place really in on the ground, because until now there is still shelling around Gaza city. People are so eager to go back to their homes, which is an area which considers so risky for them to enter it, as the Israeli tank didn't withdraw from those areas. So people still didn't feel the real of the ceasefire until now, and they like confusing according to their previous experience that they usually hear about ceasefire and stopping of the war, but after coming days, unfortunately, nothing happened on the ground. So until they, as I heard from people from Gaza, as I asked them how you are feeling, what you are feeling, they said, since we can't reach our home, we still don't believe that there is any ceasefire. Since we are staying in our home or on the rubble of our home, in that moment we will feel that the ceasefire is taking place. Also, the opening of crossing making a significant for them. They still don't feel in that as long as the crossing is still closed in Gaza. So people are waiting. Most of them actually are waiting on Netzarim corridor, where it's the opening gate for Gaza City. People who left from the north to the south are waiting. Most of them are waiting there, waiting until the ceasefire is declared formally so they can move to the Gaza City. You know how they left Gaza. They left Gaza with broken heart. They left Gaza and they believe that maybe they will not come back to Gaza. So this is the only hope that they have, that to go back to their homes in Gaza City.
Thank you. You're right, Naram, in describing the situation on the ground. It's everyone's experience is different, but there is this sense of displacement that's still very much there. Tom, if I can turn to you, what's the mood where you are at the moment in terms of how the Israelis are
Oh
seeing
no.
the ceasefire deal?
Well, thank you, Mina. I mean, it's an astonishing moment. The first thing I did this morning was go and walk to a hostage encampment outside the official residence of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I was walking there a few days ago for Yom Kippur, and there were crowds and there were many people crying. because I think that up until now, we hadn't really been in a more depressing phase for the fate of the hostages. These were 20 people that I think most Israelis thought were going to be the hardest to get out from the very beginning. Young men serving soldiers. I went there today and there was elation. And we've seen similar scenes across Israel. There was an invitation for President Trump to go and speak at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Plenty of signs that this great weight has been lifted. Now, there's the immediate humanitarian aspect, which is that these hostages and their suffering has been a priority issue for Israelis. The names of them, but also the names of their family members, are household names across the country and indeed across the world in many instances. But also the people I spoke to had a broader view of this moment, if it goes ahead, which is that the release of the hostages is a chance for Israel to recover from a trauma that allows them to address other issues. Namely, how do we come to terms with October 7? How do we deal with what is known here as the diplomatic tsunami? How do we rebuild Israel's image? And for those Israelis, and I admittedly, I don't think it's the majority, but they are an important voice. How do we envision the future with Palestinians so that such an event doesn't happen again? So I think this is a moment of great relief, but also soon a great moment of reckoning, one would hope, after such a terrible war in which Israel's standing has suffered a massive blow.
You're right. There are many elements to pick up for societies, of course, Palestinian and Israeli society, but there's also the political fallout, and we'll come to that in a moment to talk about the political fallout for the Palestinians, be it Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and what that future looks like, but also, of course, Israel and what the future of the Israeli leadership will look like. And often people say a big part of this has to be reform on the Palestinian side, which I completely agree with, but there certainly has to be reform on the Israeli side at the very least too. But first I want to come to Ali, because of course this is a deal that was announced by President Trump, and it was one that he has had a personal stake in, but of course had really important regional players, Jordan from the sidelines, but really it's Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, the three who have direct ties with Hamas, who are negotiating on their part, but also have been working round the clock to get this deal. So could you give us a sense of how the deal came about, but also the importance of that regional element?
Mina, there were many turning points, but one of the main incidents that happened that changed the calculations around the region and in Israel, inside Israel, was the Israeli strike on Doha. This strike was meant to take out all of Hamas leadership, and it was a one-off strike meant to set new rules of engagement, maybe in the region and especially in the Gulf. The failure to kill the Hamas leadership and the reaction and the united stance between Qatar, its neighbors, and the Gulf, and then the Arab countries put a lot of pressure on the Israelis, but also put the pressure on the U.S. administration. And what came after is massive pressure to try and stop this war and come up with a deal. Not only that, the Arab mediators and the Arab countries, after the strike, mobilized all their diplomatic forces and efforts to try to push for a Palestinian statehood. And they managed, through Saudi Arabia and France, sponsored the conference in the UN to bring in more states to recognize Palestine, and this put more pressure on the US and on Israel. After the conference, 4 countries out of 5 in the Security Council, permanent members of the Security Council, became the recognized Palestinian statehood, except the US, which meant that the US and Israel were being more and more isolated on the world stage. And this is how it started. And since we were in New York, we sat with many diplomats and we sat with many officials who were involved in these talks, and they explained how this pressure managed to convince the US administration that this is the right time to put an end for this war.
So that was convincing the US administration. What about convincing both Hamas and Israel? How do you feel that we've been close to a ceasefire deal before? What do you think changed to actually push them?
There are many factors. For Israel, for example, there is the Palestinian statehood and the global isolation. There is also a push from many European countries to put sanctions on Israel. And there is also the claim, or not the claim, the UN has stated there is a genocide happening in Gaza. And many countries don't want to be seen as complicit in this war anymore. So there is this pressure. There's the pressure of sanctions. And there is also the failure of eliminating all of Hamas leadership in one strike. For Hamas, Hamas has been in survival mode for almost a year now. It has barely leadership on the ground. There is a lot of obstacles for communication between its leadership overseas and its leadership on the ground. They have less fighters, they have less weapons, and they want to somehow secure a future for the group. And this is the right moment to do it. Hamas is in survival mode. Israel is completely or even much more isolated than before. And the US administration has reached a point where it believes that this is the right moment to strike a deal, and everyone accepted the deal.
Naram, if we can turn to Hamas, as Ali said, Hamas is in survival mode, but also the Israeli government made it clear that for them, they want to destroy Hamas entirely. And also the Trump plan says that there has to be complete handing over of arms and weapons by Hamas and a new authority to lead Gaza. How do you see this playing out once, inshallah, a ceasefire is actually put in place?
I must say that now what they are caring about is the interest of the Gazan nation. They are looking for what is best for them. Maybe it's late, but anyway. Uh, People in Gaza now, actually, most of them are feeding up and feeling that they want something to change the situation that they use it before in Gaza. They are welcome to anything that could be new for them, anything that will make a relief for them, to bring a new stage of life for them. For sure, Hamas will not make it easily. I mean, they will not be that one that will say that, okay, take whatever you want to take. But I think that Hamas believe that Netanyahu will do something to not make it to the end. They believe that Netanyahu will do anything to sabotage the deal. I think they believe Netanyahu is the one who will make it not done. In this case, they will be the good in this situation, that we don't sabotage the deal, but other one who is sabotaging it. But it will not be easy for Hamas to handle their weapon. If they will do it, maybe they will not let us go through 2 years of war and destroying Gaza in this situation. So maybe they believe that there is something happened that sabotage the deal, but not Hamas. It will be maybe Netanyahu. And as Mardawai said, the Hamas leader, that Netanyahu already is trying to sabotage the deal by change names in the list. So they already talking about that now. Still, the ceasefire doesn't declared, and they are talking about the sabotaging of the deal.
Thank you, Naram. This idea of brinkmanship, and Hamas was hoping that it's Netanyahu that won't agree to the deal. And I spoke to several Arab officials last week who said that their message to Hamas was, don't be the ones who are the spoilers, because if you say no, Netanyahu is banking on you saying no, so he can say to the Americans, if it was up to me, we'd have a deal. It's Hamas who are the spoilers. And on the flip side, Israel was hearing from the Americans and others, don't you be the spoilers, because if it's Hamas who doesn't want to agree to a deal, you want to put it on them. So it's an interesting idea of perception also of who will be the spoiler. So Tom, I want to turn to you, and if you respond to some of what Naram is saying, particularly in terms of the calculus of the Israeli prime minister and also his government and how they will handle the next few days. And then if there is a ceasefire in place, will they actually stick to their agreement and the deal there? Are they counting on Hamas being the ones to breach it?
Well, there's endless ways that the government could try and sort of muddy this process, but I think overarching all of this is someone outside of Israel, President Donald Trump. And there's a reason why the hostage families and the many people who prioritize getting hostages out above all else in Israel are speaking directly to the president and inviting him to come and address them and inviting him to all these platforms where he looks like a sort of grand peacemaker to almost marginalize Netanyahu because they know that Netanyahu, for many cynical reasons, but reasons that we've seen he's willing to act on before, will probably try and scupper this deal. Now, the timetable makes me think that the hostage exchange will go ahead. Things get a lot harder in the subsequent phases, in the subsequent points of the deal. But what we have now, according to the people that I've spoken to most recently about it, is a security cabinet meeting at 5. That's a small group of people who will agree the deal. Then we have one in an hour's time, an hour after that at 6 p.m. local time, in which the government will vote on this. Now, again, this will probably pass, but quite possibly with the rejection of far-right ultra-religious nationalists in the government. And then we have a 24-hour period where the Israeli military has to move back. And then we have a 72-hour clock that starts ticking when these exchanges begin. Now, there's the possibility that within that 72-hour period, some complications emerge. Maybe the hostages aren't released in one go. Maybe it becomes confusing. That's also probably when a lot of the conversations around the Palestinians that will be in exchange for this is solidified. And that's a really, really sensitive subject, particularly for Mr. Netanyahu's far-right coalition. But I think that even an issue like that really is about as highly strung as it gets, probably will not be enough to counter the pressure that President Trump is putting on the Israeli government. What happens after that, perhaps when Mr. Trump loses interest or other issues come to the surface, and when there isn't the specificity of this current stage of the deal, we don't know. But I say that for now, it seems more likely than not that we go ahead with this exchange.
A cautiously optimistic assessment from Tom. Ali, do you agree with that? Do you think we can probably get through these stages of the deal, but it gets trickier?
It's a very tricky deal indeed. Even the first phase, which is a ceasefire and release of hostages and exchange for prisoners, it's very tricky too, because one of the main obstacles is locating the bodies of the Israeli hostages that have been killed in Gaza. But we've seen news that US President Donald Trump is expected in Israel on Saturday, which means that it won't happen unless it's 100% sure that the Israelis won't be able to sabotage this deal. And this puts a huge pressure on Netanyahu and on the army on the ground to try and abide by the rules and try to limit any action that could jeopardize this deal. We've also seen news that there is a task force by the Turks, I guess, and Qataris and Israelis and others who may be able to help find and locate the bodies of the hostages and the remaining hostages, to facilitate implementing this deal. The coming hours are very important, very critical, but we're seeing more US involvement, and the news that US President Trump is coming to the region and going to Israel puts a lot of pressure on the Israelis and prevent them from jeopardizing anything, this deal.
Now, one country we haven't mentioned is Iran. And they have been quite quiet, especially with the snapback sanctions back on and with all the developments of the last few months. Ali, in your assessment, what will be Iran's calculus now? And Could they be spoilers in the near term, or is it in their interest at the moment to de-escalate?
At the beginning, Iran said that this 20-point plan was not good for the region and it could drive the region towards chaos. But now that Hamas, its proxy, has approved it, it will change its narrative and it will claim that this is a victory for Hamas and for its access. This is how we're used to Iran, trying to take advantage of every situation and claim it's a victory for its strategy and for its strategy in the region and for its access. So Iran might try to claim that this is an Iranian victory too, because they think or they portray themselves as the main supporter of Hamas throughout the month of the war. Now, how does it impact Iran strategically and strategic thinking? I mean, it has to have some really interesting impact because it involves Hezbollah disarming too. And it raises the question, if one proxy has accepted a 20-point plan that requests this specific group to disarm, what about the others in the region and mainly Hezbollah?
For those who haven't read it, Ali had a great analysis and commentary on our website regarding this idea of victory and who will try to claim victory. But you're right, the so-called axis of resistance here will be biding their time. Naram, I was going to come to you. There we go. I wanted to ask you, please, regarding the Palestinian detainees and who could be on that list. Tom spoke about the hostages and the hostage families, also wanting to keep President Trump engaged. What about the Palestinian detainees? Do we have any idea of who could be amongst those, the high-profile detainees that are released? And also, how does the Palestinian political space react to those who are potentially released?
As the deal mentioned, that there will be around 2,000 Palestinian prisoners who will be released, among them 250 from prisoners who have a long sentences and a long-term life. As some news said, but it's not sure, that among the released could be Ahmed Saadat and Barghouti and Hassan Salama, but nothing is assured now. And as the Maradai, the Hamas leader said that Israel is still accepted some of the names to be included in the list. Maybe they mentioned about those names, Ahmed Saadat and Muhammad Salama. So until now, there is nothing assured. There is news that some of people who have been captive after 7th of October will be released also, but until now there is no assured names. People of Gaza will be happy to welcome the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners, and most of the family actually say that we will not feel happy until we are gathered with our sons who are still in the Israeli prisons. But to talk about 2,000, it's a big number actually. And it will make a difference. And this is a good achievement, let us say, for Hamas to make this achievement for the Palestinian prisoners to be released. And we hope that this number to be released at the end. Most of people who have been captive after the 7th of October, especially people who doesn't have any relation with Hamas. There are many who doesn't have any relation with Hamas and still inside the Israeli prison. For sure, their family are waiting to hear if there will be among the released prisoner. For example, the doctors who had been captured by Israeli soldiers during the operations inside Gaza.
Absolutely, Nagham. I can imagine families on the Palestinian side and also on the Israeli side waiting for their loved ones to come back. But as you said, also Palestinians, there are many that have been taken that are unrelated to Hamas and were not even charged. They've just been detained for many, many months, and we'll see which of them come out. Tom, I want to ask you, in terms of one of the questions we have from one of our attendees, how can we be sure that Israel will not continue its military campaign after the hostages have been released? This has been one of the big questions of, well, what's the guarantee? Hamas hands over the hostages, hands over the bodies of those who have died. What can stop Israel from resuming its military campaign?
Well, it's a very good question. It's probably the most important question in all of this if we're taking a more long-term view. As I sort of said before, I think it's really international pressure, and it's whatever President Trump is willing to exert on Israel. And there has been, I mean, I can't think of a precedent of a US president exerting so much direct and public pressure on Israel as we've seen. But there is a real question over how long that maintains. I think buy-in regionally is extremely important. Maybe the US will get distracted and have other priorities, but President Trump wants to be seen as a sort of regional peacemaker. And I think concerted engagement from Gulf states, from Turkey, from regional powers is a really important way to keep focus. But I think that, the reason this is such an important question is because it's far from certain. And I can only really see international pressure, particularly US pressure, and then secondary regional pressure as guaranteeing this.
Tom, to what point did the push for Palestinian statehood and what we saw happening on the 22nd of September in New York with the Saudi-French meeting and having countries, as Ali said, members of the permanent security members, France and the UK, recognizing a Palestinian state, how much did that really push the Israelis to come to an agreement on not only this deal, but realize that the global mood had changed?
Well, I think it's funny because here there's a great enthusiasm to sort of dispel European concerns and make it seem like, it's a pointless diplomatic exercise that doesn't mean anything. But really, it's a sign of, in just 2 years, how Israel's closest allies have gone, I mean, almost all of the closest allies have gone from solidarity that we've never seen before, probably, to taking steps that seemed impossible. And I think it was mostly symbolic. But for the Israelis that are thinking about their standing in the world, even this symbolism matters. And it also showed that Europe was willing to, and the West was willing to take steps that seemed beyond the pale before. Now, the statehood is symbolic. What do we have after that? Well, we only really have pretty concrete measures. And as we sort of mentioned at the beginning, these include things like sanctions and cultural isolation from sporting events. And this stuff matters. So I think this was probably viewed as a sort of chain, and the Palestinian statehood was an important important link in that chain, and the links after that are stuff that really could hurt Israel. Things like EU, changing preferential trading status with the EU, by far Israel's largest trading partner. This is stuff that would actually affect how Israelis feel at home, and I think that really rammed the point home that this is damaging Israel to a level that could be beyond repair. Not there yet, but possible.
And Ali, before I turn to Ali, for those of you joining us, please feel free to put in your questions in the Q&A box and we will come to you. But Ali, I wanted to ask you, this point of keeping the attention span not only of President Trump, but also regionally, it's really focused minds, the need to come to a solution. Do you envision that if the ceasefire holds and if the killing stops, we will still be able to maintain this political momentum, or will other things catch on and lose the momentum, especially when it comes to trying to end the occupation of Palestine and really coming up with a two-state solution?
Thanks, Mina. This is the first step for a comprehensive agreement. It could be a path towards a bigger agreement in the region that could bring in more players like Iran and like other parties in the Middle East. So this could open the door for the dream comprehensive agreement that we have been speaking about for years and years. I just want to add one point to what Tom said. And Tom has written a really good piece a few days ago on the October 7th anniversary about the pressure on Israel and about what Israelis feel and about the isolation and about the fear of being sidelined from many events around the globe, which is that in the 20-point plan, there is the point 19, which is the fruit of the pressure by France and by the recognition of Palestinian statehood by several countries. It says that it acknowledged in writing that there is a self-determination process for the Palestinians, and it opens the door for Palestinian statehood. And Israel has agreed to this. I know it seems a little bit long. It has many obstacles and it's a long way ahead. But at least in writing, you have something that says that Israel and the US agreed on, which is that there is a path for statehood.
And you're right, there are those important parts of the deal that also includes the fact that it was a real commitment from the US about stopping deportation, which was a real threat of the people of Gaza from their homeland, but also this point of the US voicing its rejection of annexation of the West Bank, which was also a big concern. We have a question from one of our attendees, and Nagham, I'm going to turn to you for this question. Do you see Hamas getting a role in the future? Comparing the 20-point plan of Trump to what Hamas is disseminating to the Palestinians, there's a huge difference. Do you think that Hamas can try to maneuver what they, maneuver now and change what they've actually accepted to have a backdoor comeback politically? This is from one of our attendees.
Hamas is not the leader of Hamas. There are still members of Hamas on the ground on Gaza. How can you exile them? How you can stop their work on the ground? And there are many of them. Those people who fight, those people who struggled actually and fight the Israeli soldier. How can you stop those people from being in Gaza or exile them or just tell them your rule is stopped? I don't think it's easy to exile Hamas from the Palestinian picture. They will stay in any way. I don't know how, but Hamas will not end. Hamas will not be over. They will be in any way, in any picture. But it's difficult to just exile Hamas from the Palestinian case, from the Palestinian picture in general. And they still talking about handing the weapon will not be as you think. As soon as the occupation is ended, we will hand our arm and weapon. It's how could that happen? It's something really in a dream just to talk that the occupation is ended in Palestine. It's something really can't just say that the occupation will be end. So still Hamas talking about their weapon, we will not hand our weapon until the occupation is ended. And it's not easy, actually. So I don't think that the Hamas will be exiled from Gaza. Hamas will stay in Gaza in any way, even in not so clearly, but they will still be. Hamas is among people, the sons of people. So I don't think that we will just banish Hamas from the Palestinian picture.
But in terms of governance, and this is also a question that I'll put to you from one of the attendees, this idea of self-determination, there's talk about an administration, a technocratic administration to govern Gaza after Hamas as a governing entity. Do you think Palestinians will get to choose who governs them in the near future?
if you, there are still people who support Hamas in Gaza. We have to believe in that. There are still people who support what did Hamas did in 7th of October. So if you give them that choice, they will choose Hamas again. But let us say how many of those people. And are those people will make the change? I don't think so. So the most of people who are on the who will make that change or to choose, I don't think that they will choose Hamas anymore.
The vast majority, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, I want to turn to you. We have a couple of questions to you. One is by one of our attendees asking, what impact might Smotrich, the far-right extremist Israeli minister, stance have on the cabinet vote for the deal tonight? So what impact could it have? And then the second question is from one of our attendees asking, what impact, if the deal persists, will it have on Netanyahu's long-term political survival?
Well, we've seen the reaction of Smotrich, who's an important member of this group that could leave the government. We're still waiting for Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's viewed as something of a partner. He hasn't given his response yet, but I imagine if it will be as direct as Smotrich's, if not even more. There's a few things that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir could do. One is fully removing themselves from the government and also not voting with the government. That's the most dramatic option. And that deprives Netanyahu of a majority. There's also the option that we've seen happen throughout the course of the war of them leaving the government as a sort of important but largely symbolic step, but still voting with it, or at least keeping their future choices ambiguous, allowing them a bit more room for politicking with Netanyahu. Now, it's important to note that even if they do leave, the opposition have promised Netanyahu a safety net until the hostages are released. Now, that is an enticing option, it seems, but it's very likely that once the hostages are out, the opposition will change tack and do all they can to prompt elections, which sort of takes us on to the second question, which is that, I mean, at this rate, the elections are scheduled for basically this time next year. Most of the people that I speak to seem to say that these pressures on Netanyahu make an earlier election date most likely, probably early in 2026. Now, yesterday we saw some news that the opposition factions are coordinating to try and bring about this election date. So I think that's probably the most likely. One problem is that the opposition is lackluster. It doesn't provide that much of an enticing alternative. A lot of Israelis complain about we don't really know what the opposition stands for, what it means. So yes, Netanyahu's polling has been has been low since the beginning of the war. But at the same time, there's no inspirational choice on the other hand. So I think the outlook for Netanyahu's political future is not good. Earlier elections are more likely than not. There are concerns that he will enact some sort of legislation to delay elections. I think that's less likely, and that would obviously be a huge constitutional crisis. But at the same time, it looks harder. It doesn't look as clear cut as there being a sort of massive new political revival in Israel, because the opposition itself is pretty limp.
Yes, indeed. I think that's the point of having a weak opposition is probably the biggest advantage that Netanyahu has. Ali, I want to turn to you. There is a question from one of our attendees who says, we've heard rumors that this situation could have sparked an Arab-style NATO. Do we believe this development could be another outcome of the war? And I assume particularly, of course, after the strike on Doha.
The question is, do Arabs need an Arab NATO? I think what happened after the strike is that they met, especially the Gulf countries, and they reinforced this narrative that the security of one country is the security of all, and any threat towards any of these countries is a threat to all. I don't think there is a need for a NATO Arab coalition or a force. I think that the unity and the united stance that the Arab countries, especially the Gulf, have shown after the Doha attack is enough, and it bear fruit. I mean, it's the agreeing to a ceasefire and the pressure that has been put on the US to end the war is part of this strategy, and it's part of this pressure that all the Arab countries together diplomatically has exerts and has put on the US to go and take this path.
So we're coming to a close of our discussion, but I know we have a few more questions in the Q&A, but I want to turn to each of you to ask, do you think this deal, if inshallah it goes through, will earn Donald Trump the Nobel Peace Prize? Ali, what's your take?
It's a very, very difficult question. I think the question was if someone is choosing Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump for the Nobel Prize, would have to ask, if he is the U.S. president, could he have ended this war earlier? And if so, why it stopped just now? I mean, we spoke about the reasons, but at the same time, we know that Israeli achievements on the ground weren't worth all this killing and all this mass starvation. And we know that the only capable party that was able to stop the Israeli killing machine in Gaza was the U.S. administration. So the question is, could he have stopped the war earlier? If the answer is yes, then I don't think he deserves a Nobel Prize. If the answer is no, and this is the only moment, and he took the right decision at the right moment, then yes, because this is a devastating war. It's a genocide, and it's stopping with a U.S. decision.
Tom, one of the questions also, briefly, do you think it could earn Trump the Nobel Prize? But also, I want you to answer a question for one of the attendees. Will Israel fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think in terms of the prize, I can tell you that it's been one of the main sound bites of the day from Israel's opposition and from even people in the government, from Mike Huckabee, the US ambassador. They all want him to get the prize. I don't know. I wish there was such thing as a provisional prize, that the full version of it would be dependent on a longer term structure. Such a thing doesn't exist, so we'll just have to see. I think withdrawal is one of those issues in the wider plan that I struggle to see a sort of clean solution to, along with disarmament and who governs the strip afterwards. I think I'm pessimistic, to be honest. October 7, more than anything else, made Israelis feel vulnerable. And one of the main obsessive discussions after this was the talk of whether us removing our settlements from the strip was a good idea or not. And it's quite mainstream now, despite what the region might think, to say that that was a bad idea. So I think, given the sort of paranoia that Israelis have and the great sense of vulnerability, and particularly that we haven't even had from Israel a comprehensive view of how the crisis happened, I think this will be one of the last things that gets sorted, if indeed it ever does.
Thank you, Tom. And Nagam, I want to end with you. There are a number of questions, but one of them, you know, Hamas doesn't have new backers. Who would they be? And, you know, how does Hamas survive this is one question. And then the final question is, do you think that the possibility of having unity between the Palestinian Authority and different Palestinian factions is possible? There was talk about the PLO being reinvigorated some months ago now and saying, you know, a new type of Palestinian leadership. Can we see that? Do you see that in the horizon, or is it still too fragmented?
First, about Hamas. Hamas lost a lot, actually, after 7th of October. At the beginning, they earned the support of international outside of Gaza, but inside Gaza, they lost a lot actually. People, after what they go through, they believe that what's happening in Gaza is because of Hamas. So actually, I don't think that Hamas will be welcomed anymore in Gaza regard people. So Hamas tried to survive, but it failed actually. And what happened recently from the pressure on Hamas, that's what led Hamas to accept the deal. I'm sure if nothing, if no one put pressure on Hamas like what happened recently, I don't think Hamas will accept the deal. I hope the deal to end by ending the war and not make any thing to sabotage the deal. And for a union in Gaza and in Palestine, I hope that happened before 7th of October. I hope this unity happened before the devastation that's happened in Gaza and the destruction that is happening in Gaza. The situation in Gaza is so horrible. And if you come to people and ask them, what do you think about the future? They say, they will tell you there is no future for Gaza. The situation in Gaza is catastrophic. It's not as what you see on the screen of the news. No, what is on the ground is really catastrophic. There is no any source of life in Gaza. So I don't know if even people who lives in Gaza want to stay in Gaza after what's happening in Gaza. So what care about people now is their survival and what could be good for them. For sure, if the next government will only interest about they will care about only the interest of people, they will welcome it. But they have tried PLO before, they have tried Hamas before. I don't think they want to try them again. So they will choose anything that will be new and uh, um, independent, not following any of that faction that could has their own interests, actually.
Thank you, Naram. That's a very sobering and important note to end on, what the Palestinians have been through, but also this idea that there needs to be a different way, not only in leadership and how Gaza is led and the political authority there, but of course also just generally for the region, a path away from the destruction and the devastation we've seen. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. Thank you for being with us. You can continue to follow all of these stories and the coverage of Naram, Tom, Ali, and the wider national team on our website, www.thenationalnews.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Naram, Ali, and Tom, for your time on a very busy news day.